and he's live on the John Fredericks Network, 10 to noon, Monday to Saturday, and he's with us now. Steve Bannon, great to have you, sir.
Well, thank you, and thanks for all. I love the audience feedback. You know, these shows, particularly about the CCP, have had a real impact. And one of the things we try to do in War Room Pandemic, and John, you were so essential and critical to getting the show started as War Room Impeachment. We try to give you tomorrow's news today. Mm-hmm. What we try to do is not just chase, and there's a lot of guys that do that, and they do it great. We try to say, hey, what's the signal from the noise? What is really driving this? And yesterday, you know, Mike Pompeo came out and declared that all of China's claims to the South China Sea are illegal and will not be looked at will not be considered by the United States of America. Also, O'Brien and Pottinger has been announced there in Europe, talking to our European allies, particularly Italy, France, Germany, and the United Kingdom. And what they're talking about, I think, is to talk about NATO's. You know, the alliances is going to have an expanded footprint. I think that's going to be in the South China Sea. I think you're going to see NATO. And yesterday, the Times of London, leads during the Times of London was the Royal Navy is going to build a new aircraft carrier called the HMS, Her Majesty's ship, the Queen Elizabeth. And guess what? It's going to be home ported in the Far East, maybe Singapore. Mm-hmm. And particularly for the audience down in the Tidewater area and Hampton Roads. You know, this is like 1937 or 38. Hong Kong is Czechoslovakia. The Chinese Communist Party is in a hot information and economic war with the United States of America. It has to be. President Trump, I hope, over the next couple of days, really stands up and is more Churchill than Neville Chamberlain in regard of standing up to the Chinese Communist Party. You know, this whole Black Lives Matter, and not that legitimate concerns people have with racism and things that have to be sorted out, and some things have to be sorted out. But this whole undercurrent of Black Lives Matter and Antifa, which is really cultural Marxism that takes us back to the Cultural Revolution of the Maoists in the 60s in China, goes back to the Bolshevik Revolution, goes back to the French Revolution, where they're trying to destroy the church, or they're trying to destroy any type of spiritual longing or yearning for people, along with the nuclear family. This has always been their target. This has been their target since the French Revolution. And you're seeing it play out now. This is playing out as a global conflict. It's the Chinese Communist Party, the unfinished work of the 20th century, versus the Alliance of Liberty. And I think the Alliance of Liberty is starting to come together, whether that's in Taiwan, whether it's in the streets of Hong Kong, whether it's on the border of India with our great ally Modi and the nationalists in India. And you're seeing this coming together. And the head fake by the corporations are this whole, wokeness is a head fake where they continue to use the slave labor in China, the NBA, Nike, all these guys. The central problem in the world today, as far as economics go, is the Chinese people have been enslaved by the Chinese Communist Party and the globalist corporations and, quite frankly, Wall Street and the City of London. And that's made everybody else serfs. That's why these young kids in these protests don't own anything. They're not bought into the system because they're not part of the system. And this is what the Chinese Communist Party in that business model has to be destroyed. Donald Trump stood up to it. You saw Joe Biden. The Democrats understand what they have to sell and where they have to sell it. That speech last week in Scranton, Pennsylvania is the single, to me, most seminal event in this campaign so far, because the Biden people showed their hand. They understand they have to remake Joe Biden as a populist. And the reason is globalist economics, just like in 2016, is even less sellable today in the United States of America. They know they have to get this guy to Wilmington, Delaware, where he's the senator for the globalist corporations. Wilmington's a mailbox in a federal court, right? Mm-hmm. And great tax advantage and great legal protections for the globalist corporations. Mm-hmm. And Joe Biden's their concierge. He's been their guy for 47 years. But the Democrats are smart. Just because Biden's a moron doesn't mean the people around him are dumb. We're facing a smart, tough enemy with the I shouldn't say enemy, smart, tough opponents in the Democratic Party and a smart enemy in the Chinese Communist Party and the global left. And we've got to get savvy to this. Biden is going to start playing himself up as an economic populist, an economic nationalist, right out of President Trump's playbook. And President Trump, look, he is the populist. He is the economic nationalist. He's done more about Buy American and Hire American than any president in history. However, in this kind of, action, 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 or now what I call it action, urgency, and focus. Action, urgency, and focus. The one thing we have to do is he has to take on the Chinese Communist Party today, because that starts to break their business model, and it starts to unlock the great power of the American worker, right? So this is going to be this part of the campaign, I think, over the next 2 months between now and Labor Day. I think it's the most important part of the campaign. This is where it really is going to be decided by Labor Day. Remember, this thing about, we're going to have Bill McGinley on the show today, one of the guys from the White House counsel's office who was there in the first couple of years, brilliant lawyer, going to talk about all this mail-in voting. But whether you like it or not, November 3rd is not Election Day. November 3rd is the last day of the election. And that's what people have to start for. It's the last day of the election. This thing, people are going to start voting, I think, as early as September, early September with the mail-ins. And by October, I happen to think by mid-October, this thing will have been decided by October 15th. And I think less than 50% of the American people potentially could actually stand in line and vote on Election Day. Now, I'm not happy with that. I like elections to be people go and you vote on that day, right? But I just don't think it's going to play out, and that's why I think for your audience, I think these next 2 months, instead of being the summer doldrums, I think they're actually going to be the most important part of the campaign.
Right, because whether the states institute their complete mail-in ballot fraud, where they send ballots out, in some states like California are going to do that, but the majority of states that don't, still people are going to be voting absentee because they're still concerned about getting COVID-19 or whatever. So you're going to have a record number of legitimate absentee ballots where you have to, apply for it, get it mailed in, you sign it and send it back. So I agree with you on that. But Steve Bannon with us. Steve, let me just ask you straight out. Is the president going to stand up to the CCP and the Chinese over the next several days, like you've outlined, or is he going to get Karl roved and back down and to do some kind of a Jared Kushner compromise? Which is it going to be?
Well, I think you're going to see this across a number of issues. This action, action, action. He's the protagonist in this drama. And particularly when you look, you just can't run the 16 playbook as far as rallies. And here's why. Right. The Democratic governors in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I think they've limited gatherings to like 10 people.
Right.
Or
something like that, right.
And they're not going to, you just, look, our rule, I always say, hey, look, it is what it is. You got to play the cards you're dealt.
Exactly.
Would you rather have rallies? Yes, I'd rather have the ability to have rallies. Is America in a time where the Trump base is fired up? Right. I think the Trump base is fired up and understand that it's going to take not just another 4 years of Donald Trump. It's going to take another 8 years of people after that. And so you've got to build this into a movement. That's why I think we're so proud to be associated with you and AVN. Because I think that is the kind of the media backbone of this movement, but it's going to take a while, and people are fired up. So yes, do you need rallies? They're always great. Rallies are fantastic, and they're great for spreading the word. But he's the protagonist in this drama now. He can set the tone every day with action. And they keep talking about Joe Biden, not coming out of his, he does this proof of life video every now and again with his wife.
Proof of life video.
But he doesn't listen. You're not going to smoke him out. You're not going to smoke him out.
No, he's not going out of his basement. Why is he going to go out of his basement? Look, he's going to sit there with Joe Biden holding his hand so he can stand up straight with a back brace. If you see him walk, I mean, he's walking like a little old man. He can barely navigate his way through a foyer. So sure, I mean, look, sidebar, Steve, no different than Tommy Tuberville in Alabama. The guy hasn't had a press conference. He hasn't campaigned. He's got a big lead. He hasn't put a single policy position or done a single media event in 4 months. So he's in the desert, basically, trying to hang on to a win. And, Trump backed him. And so Sessions is down by 16. I backed Jeff Sessions last evening because, he's been there for us from day one. When nobody else was talking about immigration or the wall or anything else, Jeff Sessions was there. I know he had the issues as Attorney General, but he's been there. But it's going to be the same. It's going to be the exact same strategy. Biden's not going to come out of the basement. Why should he? He's got this lead. But here's the question. Since you came on our show 3 weeks ago, you said action, action, action. That's all he's done. So he's taken your advice. And he's starting to move up now. You see poll after poll.
I don't know if he's taking the advice, but I think he's an action-oriented guy.
No, he's taking your advice.
Entrepreneur.
No, Steve. I know you want to be modest, Steve. He's taking your advice.
He's listening to the John Fredericks Radio Show. No, here's what I think. I think that he's an action-oriented guy. I think they've knocked the cobwebs off a little bit, and now they're focused on types of act. Now, the question is, like, for instance, I consider myself one of the leaders and proud to be the leaders of the Ultra Hawks of China. And I've been there for many, many years because I've been in China, around China since I think 1977 as a naval officer, right, in the Pacific Fleet. You're right. The choice here, you're going to see it, I think, over the next couple of days is some sort of, slap on the wrist with their special status versus going after them. I laid it out on Jesse Waters the other night. To me, it's pretty straightforward. You got to sanction these banks. You got to cut China off from the U.S. dollar, right? And everybody's concerned, you're going to lose the status of the prime reserve currency. That's not going to happen. There's no other currency in the world. There's no crypto. There's no the RMB. The Chinese thing's a joke. All their allies, and you talk about now, they're announcing a new 25-year pact with Iran. If you look at their allies in the Eurasian landmass, North Korea, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, I believe,
right.
And Russia.
Right.
None of these are great places, right? They're fantastic people. Unfortunately, they're all run by kleptocrats or dictators.
Right.
The economies. None of the economies really work, and that's their allies. And by the way, they don't care. These dictators don't care about that. That's the axis. That's what we're facing. That's the war of the 21st century. Is the Alliance of Liberty? It's Japan. It's Australia. It's India. The United States, Europe. That's why they're talking to NATO today about. That's why the British are announcing, hey, guess what? We're going to have a new aircraft carrier, and it's going to be stationed in Singapore, right? The South China Sea, as your folks down in Tidewater know, is the central most important naval choke point in the world about world commerce. And this is what it's going to come down. That's why he's got to stand up. Hong Kong is Czechoslovakia in 1938.
Right.
Okay. The West has to make a decision. You're either going to stand up to these group of guys, or you're going to pay. Listen, if we don't stand up to these guys in this hot information war and hot economic war they've got going on for us now, you're going to over time segue to a kinetic war. There's no doubt about it. The Chinese communists, this is what they're going to do. I said this on the radio in 2015. I said within 5, 6, 7 years, you're going to be in a shooting war in the South China Sea. What Pompeo said yesterday is that, hey, you don't have any claims to the South China Sea. It's a free international waterway, and the United States Navy and other navies of the world are going to make sure it's open for commerce. And I think the next step there is to give them a month and to send a notice to them and say, hey, look, these tolls they put in, these artificial islands are essentially aircraft carriers, right? They've got like 12 of them. They're landing strips, aircraft carriers. I'd give them 72 hours. I'd say, hey, environmentally, they've already been condemned environmentally. They're screwing up the coral reefs and all the life in the South China Sea. I'd give them 72 hours. Say, hey, boys, you got to take the runways down. You lads in Beijing, or we're going to send guys in and take them down for you. I think I'd throw down hard, and I'd throw down hard in Hong Kong. I'd cut them off from the U.S. dollar. I'd sanction all the big banks, Bank of China, Hong Kong, Shanghai Bank. I'd sanction the other day. I said I'd sanction not these mid-level grundoons they're sanctioning about the Uyghurs. I'd sanction President Xi and Wan Qishan and all the top guys in the Communist Party. And here's what I would do. I would expose their wealth. People, just put this in perspective. Everybody talks about the wealth of the Gulf Emirates and the Saudis and the UAE, but the Chinese Communist Party, of 1.4 billion people, there's only 90 million communists. There's only a few thousand people that really matter. There's 8 to 10 families that are the central families around the revolution, around the Long March. Those are still the same pack that run the entire country, like the Imperial China. It hasn't changed. They're the wealthiest families in the world. Their wealth dwarfs. You can add up the Gulf Emirates, all of them, Bahrain, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. You can add those and throw in the Russian kleptocrats on top of it. They're dwarfed by the Chinese Communist Party, and this is why you got to come up from the dollar. What is their objective is to get their money out of China and get it into real estate in London and in New York City. They have enormous wealth in this country. So while you're sitting in your home as the recipient of the Chinese Communist Party virus, right, with no college football, no high school football, you don't have a job, your retirement's all upside down. You're angry at your wife because you guys have been cramped up for with the kids.
Sure.
Your kids are not going back to school. all of it, 100%. Nancy Pelosi didn't do it. Black Lives Matter didn't do it. President Trump didn't do it. We're at each other's throats. Who did it? The Chinese Communist Party. This Dr. Yan that's been on Fox. She was on Bill Hemmer yesterday, gave a great interview. You're going to see a lot more of her. She's one of these defectors that is coming out of, they're defectors just like in Russia back in the 70s and 80s. Mm-hmm. You're seeing defectors start to come out of China. They're telling the real story. This is a Chinese Communist Party. It's a CCP virus. They did this to the West. They did this to the United States. They have to be held accountable. Where we got to start holding them accountable is in Hong Kong. If you blink in Hong Kong, they're going to know you're going to blink in other places. And you're going to have all these Wall Street guys sitting there going, oh, you can't do it. You know, the Americans, you know, you're going to pay 10 cents more for something in Walmart. Well, guess what? We're going to have to pay maybe 10 cents more for something in Walmart until we get the supply chains back here. They have to be confronted.
So the question is the president going to blink on Hong Kong? And I'll get back to my question earlier. He's got a week. Is he going to get Karl Rove? I mean, every time I see Karl Rove and these establishment globalist Republicans, losers that can't win crap, that have cost us the world, come on TV and try to give the president advice. It's like Romney 2.0. What advice is he going to take? That's the question, Steve Bannon.
Well, I think this is why shows like yours are important, and people calling into the White House are important. Look, whether it's on DACA, whether it's on the wall, whether it's on China, whether it's on Buy American, whether it's on all of these policies that are central to the Trump populism and economic nationalism, they're all in play right now. I think DACA is going to be another one. So it's who not just puts pressure. I think it's also who makes sure things are fully presented to him. When Donald Trump's presented the correct information, his default position's always the right position.
Right.
Now he has amazing instincts.
Always the right position. Always the right position. That's why the whole position is let Trump be Trump, because his instincts are, but then they get sidetracked by bad advice and the globalists in there and everything else. So I want to get to this because, look, everything you said, if Joe Biden wins, it all goes by that wayside because he's going to play footsie with them. So the question becomes, how does Trump turn the corner and win?
He's a junior partner.
Exactly.
I think it's very simple. You make the central issues. You act. You have action, urgency, and focus, and you just do action every day. You drive the narrative of this out of the West Wing and out of the Oval Office, and you force the media to cover it. If you take action, they're forced to cover. Otherwise, they're going to be doing all this other stuff. You drive action. You drive action on the pandemic. You drive action on economic nationalism. You drive action on China. You just action. Biden, look, everybody knows, even the Obama campaign or the White House, Biden is not the sharpest tool in the shed. He's not also a high-energy guy. So if you make that contrast, right, between a guy who's basically been the concierge for the global corporations up in Wilmington, Delaware for 47 years, and now wants to be to convince the Bernie voters to vote for him, is now going to be a populist and an economic nationalist he's going to do that in 4 states. He's going to do that in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, right? If that's our alternative, to me, he's the weakest possible candidate they could have put up. And I don't want to hear about, he's a nice guy and he's not offensive like Hillary. He doesn't stand for anything. He's the thing I think people hate most in politicians, which is a glad-hander that has no central vision of what he's trying to do. Right. He's just trying to get by. In America in 2020, that's not going to win if you drive the narrative. And for the president, to me, it's perfect casting because Trump's a man of action. Look, he didn't need to do this in 2016. He did this because he's a patriot. He's worth $7 or $8 billion. Got great golf courses around the world, fabulous family. Why put yourself through the torture of now you've got every district attorney in New York and they want your taxes and want your financials. Hey, if I was Trump, what I would do right now is go put your financial statements back out. I mean, if financial statements, they're saying, he's not worth anything. Put your financial statements out. Just put them out again with the amount of cash and marketable securities he's got on things. He's wealthier than I think any guy's ever been president. So, him, I would just go on total offense and just, hey, let the chips fall where they may, and just go to your default position. Just follow your instincts. Your instincts are perfect. You're in tune with the American working class. You're in tune with the American people. You're in tune with Hispanics. I think you're in tune with working class African Americans and blacks. Just bring jobs back. Focus on that. As you deal with the pandemic and confront the Chinese Communist Party. Look, it's obvious she did this to destroy his presidency. That's something that's very obvious.
No question.
regardless of whether it came out of a lab or not, regardless of whether,
irrelevant.
I'm not a conspiracy theory guy, never have been, but there's no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. That's the thing people are saying. There are no coincidences. Okay, whether it came out of a biological weapons program or it came out of the Wuhan lab, right? We now know from Dr. Yan, if you listen to what she's saying, she said, hey, on January 1st, the CDC in Beijing, I contacted them. They knew exactly what was going on. She was the contact person from the World Health Organization, a supervisory lab in Hong Kong, right? She was the one put in charge with contact these guys and find out what's going on. On January 1st, they knew about it, okay? That answers every question you need to know because the studies that come out from Southampton University said 95% of the deaths, 95% of the economic carnage would have been stopped if they had just told the world we have a problem right then. It could have all been sorted. It could have been shut down in Hubei province. The people of Wuhan wouldn't have had this horrible, essentially massacre that went on. And so it's to me, this thing's pretty black and white. And President Trump's the driver he's the protagonist in the drama. Just let the star take his role. Hit your marks and let's get on with it.
Steve Bannon, running out of time. Final question. Got to get this in. And you hit it. You said, let Trump beat Trump. His instincts, his default position's always at work. You know, a couple of weeks ago, he said, look, I'm going to rewrite DACA. We got to get rid of this. We can't give amnesty. Then he gives an interview with Telemundo. Somebody gets a hold of him. And now he's talking about giving amnesty to DACA. And the base goes crazy. Now he backs off it. What is driving this, Steve?
Listen, he's president of the United States, and these are the most fundamental, biggest issues over time. So clearly, they've got stakeholders. Remember, the corporations want to, and this is the thing that's so hypocritical about what the woke corporations are doing to Black Lives Matter. They want open borders. They want unlimited labor. They want to essentially destroy the Black and Hispanic working class. They want to flood the zone with labor and slave labor from China. They don't mind destroying the Chinese people. Remember, Lao Beijing, old 100 names, the Chinese and the deplorables are the exact same people, right? They're the ones that the whole country rests upon their shoulders, but they're the ones always getting stiffed by the elites of both countries. And now you've got this. And so I think, look, in every issue, they're going to have people in his ear. If Trump is just allowed to be Trump, and even including House style, and I realize a lot of people don't like the House style. Hey, the House style is what it is. It's not going to change, right? That's part of the package, right? If you want to take on the permanent political class, you want to take on Wall Street, you want to take on the Party of Davis, you want to take on the CCP. Guess what? You're not going to get a wilt. Mitt Romney's not going to do that. Some guy that looks like off a wedding cake is not going to do that. You're going to have a guy. You're going to have a guy that's maybe going to upset you with a couple of tweets every now and again. He upsets me with a couple of tweets every now and again. But that's the deal. Just let him beat Trump. He's a fighter. Now he's got the fight. I think he's got the fight of his career, a title fight, and let's just get action, urgency, and focus. If you do that, it's all going to turn out. And if we don't, who knows? Jump off, right? So it's going to be a wild. I think it's going to be a wild summer. Don't just go to the beach and read a novel.
Steve, we're going to turn the corner and win this election. And best line ever. We don't need Mitt Romney 2.0 like somebody that came off a wedding cake. Best line of the day, Steve Bannon. Thank you. Thank you. I will never forget that line, Steve. Thank you, Steve Bannon.